Hi, and welcome to Check Your Thread, a podcast about sewing more sustainably. My name's Zoe, and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 13 years and am the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me on this journey. Hello! Thanks for listening to the third episode of the Check Your Thread podcast. It's still such a tiny infant of a podcast, isn't it? How have you been since the last episode? Good, I hope. I've spent the last week in the north of England visiting my husband's family, so I've done precisely 0 sewing for about a week. I've got a pair of linen trousers on the go, which I'm really hoping to get finished soon so I can get some use from them before the end of the year, before the weather turns and the autumn kicks in. Just before we went away, I did manage to get a couple of garments mended for my best friend, so I'm chalking that up as a sustainability win. She has a pair of dungarees and the straps were a bit long, so they kept slipping off her shoulders, which we all know is super annoying, so I shortened those. Plus, she's got a strapless playsuit, which relies on elastic around the top edge to keep it up, and the elastic has started to go, making wearing it a little bit perilous, so I've replaced the elastic. I'm happy to do that mending and alteration for her because she definitely values my skills and she always buys me food as payment. Please send me a message with your sewing and sustainability wins. I'd love to hear what you've been up to lately. So thanks everyone who has listened to the first 2 episodes and has come back for more. I'm very grateful for the sharing on social media that you've been doing. It's so helpful to get the word out about the podcast so that other people can find it if it's up their street. So please continue to do that if you're enjoying Check Your Thread. I also want to directly thank Lee, Sue, Helena, Tanya and Kristen who have signed up this week as patrons of the Check Your Thread over on Patreon. I really appreciate your assistance in keeping the podcast going. If you're interested in supporting the podcast like the lovely people I just named, then you can find the link on the website checkyourthread.com. Right, episode 3. I've got another conversation to share with you today. This time, I'm talking to Jacqueline Shaw, who is the founder of Wax and Wraps, an African textile sewing subscription service. I expected to spend most of the conversation talking about Wax and Wraps, but as you'll hear, it turns out that Jacqueline also runs a sourcing agency for the African fashion and textiles industries, which she's also written a book about, and she has an MA in sustainable fashion. So this super interesting conversation ended up covering much more than I anticipated. Jacqueline kindly shared her views on the thorny issue of cultural appropriation and educated me on the terminology for the fabrics that she sources. Plus, she's given us a valuable window into the African textiles industry and how we can support it. You can find the show notes related to this episode on the website, checkyourthread.com, to find out more about Jacqueline and the things we discussed. I hope you enjoy this one. Here goes. Hello, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Zoe.
Brilliant. So would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little about yourself and your business?
Yes, so my name's Jacqueline Brown and I am the founding director of a company called Wax and Wraps. It's one of 2 businesses I have, but we can go into speaking more about the other one a little bit later. But Wax and Wraps I describe it as an African print subscription box. So in more simpler terms, it's a sewing kit subscription with African prints, African fabrics, and a whole lot of fun attached to it as well.
Brilliant, brilliant. So what do people get in their subscription box?
So inside their box, they would be receiving fabrics of the month, and the fabrics would be coming from a different African country every single month. They would be getting the sewing project of the month. They would be getting the whole kits that they would need. So if there's any threads or elastic tapes or zips or linings or anything they need to make up that project. Alongside that, there is what we have as the African fabric swatches as well. And these swatch cards basically are bringing a bit of education, a bit of history to some of the African fabrics that are handmade or hand woven in different countries. And then we just have to give a few extra fun bits alongside, a few gifts every month, which are coming from artisan groups or like it's made in Africa, or just sourced from the African continent. So it's really an educational box as well as providing with the sewing kits. and bringing a bit of Africa to your home each month.
Amazing. And I have to admit that I have been the lucky recipient of one of your boxes. One of the things I really loved about it is that you keep the packaging like quite minimal, and everything's like all the paper inside is like recyclable. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, because one of the reasons I do that, Zoe, is because so my background is as a fashion designer, but I've got a master's in ethical fashion
Oh,
and
fantastic.
sustainability. Yeah, so one of the main things I wanted to do is I see many subscription boxes out there, and they're the kind that people might just want to throw away because they're not so fun to look at, and they're also a lot of I call it the fluff inside.
Yes.
And the fluff is just, there's always these cards and things, just a lot of tissue paper, a lot of crinkle paper, a lot of all these extras that I know many people are not going to really use. And I said, you know what, I'm not going to put it inside. And it might be something that may seem like it's missed out, but if you don't, most people haven't really complained about that.
Yeah, because you just have so much to chuck away, don't you?
Exactly. Promotional materials and all that are great, but I just put in what is necessary for that box for that month.
Brilliant. So I have to ask, how do you source the textiles?
Okay, so this links to my other business.
Right.
Yeah, it all links together. So Wax and Wraps was founded in 2020, so it's a pandemic baby. But my main company is one called Africa Fashion Guide, and Africa Fashion Guide is an online platform and a resource. It's emerged into a sourcing agency, and it was built to, first of all, educate people about African fashion and textiles, about the possibilities of what can be done on the African continent when it comes to the fashion industry. And it's from crop to cloth, from field to fashion. So I work with fashion designers and brands and retailers if they want to do sourcing in Africa. I travel around to Africa every year, usually. And when it's not a pandemic year, I will travel around to Africa. I'll go and visit manufacturers. I go and sit with them. I source from them. And my clients through that business are purchasing textiles and homeware goods and so forth, which are all made in Africa, sourced from Africa, made by Africans and with African businesses. So when it comes to sourcing for Wax and Wraps, it was an easy business to start because, first of all, I used to sew. I used to be a bridal dressmaker. I used to do sewing as well for about 10 years. And then I also am a sourcing agent within Africa Fashion Guide.
You've
so I'm
already
already
got the contacts.
Exactly. And so I can use it as an opportunity to, help people who want to actually impact Africa through a purchase. So it's not seen as so much charity. For me, it's about trade over aid. And it's about doing business. You can get something fun out of it because you're making like what you made with the all-in-one kind of wasn't it more like a jumpsuit, wasn't it? Yeah, with the fabric that you got in your box from us. Most people probably wouldn't even know about the fabric, and then you can just explain about it, where it's coming from, its heritage, and so forth. And it looked good. The main thing is you look good. You made a great outfit, and it's also paid people for their business in Cameroon. So, it's a win-win-win.
From a sewer's perspective, what is so interesting about what you're doing is generally the fabric that we buy, we don't know where it's from. The fabric industry is pretty opaque, really, isn't it? I mean, we've got a rough idea where we think fabric may come from, but you know exactly where those fabrics have been produced, don't you?
That's exactly the thing. I mean, right now we're in an industry where first of all, there's a lot of waste. There's a lot of negativity associated with the fast fashion industry, and the worker rights and labor issues as well in developing countries, which most of these where the clothing industry is. Yeah, we're getting materials that, we don't know where they're coming from, where they've been made, and the impact that it's had on that dye. It's concerning. So my thing is, by making your own clothes, yes, you're enjoying it, you're building your craft, your skill, you're having fun, have fun with prints, as we say, but you're also being a bit more decisive, a bit more responsible with your consuming. You can wear what you make, which means you don't have to go out and shop in particular shops and purchasing things that you don't need really, or they're not going to last. And you will respect what you make more, so you will keep it for longer. So if you know that but you're making your clothing, you're also taking clothing out of the landfills because you're going to keep your clothing. It's not throwaway fashion. Plus, you know that it's creating business and trade in developing countries. That's why I say that, our box is no ordinary subscription box, is because we've got the extra edge on top of what many others may have in their own subscription boxes. We are actually doing the impact work without throwing it in your face and, making it a charity thing. It's a business thing, but it is also providing impact through trade, through the textiles industry.
So presumably, have you visited any of the factories of the textiles that you source?
Absolutely. So there's the wax print fabric that many people will call African print. That's what's typically known is, people will say, is African print.
Yeah.
The probably more correct term is wax print or Dutch wax.
Is that the same as Ankara? I wasn't sure if those terms could be used interchangeably or if they had a slightly different meaning.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I personally try to avoid calling wax print African print because this is a big discussion. Is it African print? Because it originates from the Netherlands and it originated from Indonesia. So the history of that textile is not African, but Africans have adopted it. It was brought to Africa and sold within Africa, and it's been adopted by Africans. So some will say it is now African. So it's an ongoing discussion in the African fashion field. But I say our fabrics are African fabrics because they're printed in Africa, either at the wax print houses, the print houses, or they're hand printed. So we work with batikas, tie and dyers, and all of those who do all kinds of different types of traditional prints, or they're hand woven, like the fabric we have in our August box is a hand woven fabric that's made in Uganda with a supplier partner through Africa.
Is that beautiful blue and white striped that blue and white striped fabric you put on your Instagram?
Exactly.
Oh, that's amazing. I'll put a link to that in the show notes because that was so cool to see. It's
beautiful, beautiful fabrics. And just to know that they're amazing people. So I visit many of the countries I go to. I purchase from them. I endorse them myself, and so for purchase for myself or for the business, and then I would then recommend them to others as well, so that I know that I validated them as well.
Sure. So you know how the workers are, what the conditions that they're working in, for example.
Exactly. But so that's what I would call African fabrics, because I know that it's been made in Africa, been made by African artisans or for the print houses, and you can trace it back to its source then.
Amazing. So is the cotton grown in Africa as well?
Now that's another discussion. Some of it is. So you'll find okay, so I'm a bit of a cotton geek as well. When I started my master's in ethical fashion, I looked at the cotton industry, and about 95 or 97% of African cotton is exported.
Right.
So you could, in its raw form, which means the cotton boll, the little fluffy section that you see from the plant on the cotton fields. Now, you could be wearing African cotton without realizing, because your clothing that is from Topshop may have been made in Turkey, but the cotton may have been, the raw cotton may have come from Africa and then it's been processed, woven and spun in Turkey,
right,
for example, or somewhere else. So you could be wearing it. So a lot of cotton is exported, which means there's a minimal amount of cotton, African cotton, that stays on the continent. Many of the people we work with like Uganda has a good quality cotton. So many of it is, they use that, and there's a lot of organic cotton, so there's no pesticides, it's better for farmers and so forth. And I visited cotton mills, ginneries, on the African continent as well, in different countries. So I've gone and seen the whole process. But one of the challenges is a lot of it has to be imported as the fabric form, which is a bit like frustrating.
Sure.
And it also makes it more expensive for the industry. If you think they've got cotton, but then because of the way things are working, they have to export it. And then in the raw form, and then later on, they're importing back cotton from wherever in the world as
so
a fabric,
complicated, isn't it?
so that it can make their own product. It's very, very complicated, and it's not very equal in the textile industry in that sense. So, so all the work I do really wants to highlight and bring a light upon Africa's textile supply chain and what's going on. I'm just using different mediums, if it's a sourcing agency and all the events and things we do, and the consulting, African Fashion Guide, or a subscription box product, Wax and Wraps.
Amazing. You sound very busy.
But I love it though. I mean, it's been over 10 years.
Really? So you've had the sourcing business for over 10 years?
Yeah, since 2011 we launched that I had a conference and a book and the website, and then I did a lot of sourcing and so forth. But Wax and Wraps is new.
That's your new lockdown baby.
Yeah, it's fun as well. For me, it's very fun. I get back on my sewing machine.
It looks like you have a lot of fun. Like on your YouTube and on your Instagram, you look like you're having a lot of fun with the fabrics.
Definitely. I love it.
So you're making anything for yourself at the moment?
So what I do is every month with the box, I will make the product, showcase how I've done it, add my little spin to it. Like when a couple of months ago we did a romper in wax print, and the pattern was a more simplified romper. But I decided, no, for me, I'm going to add a little bit of a ruffle and a frill. I'm going to do one-sided. I'm going to change it up a little bit and just give people some alternatives of what they can do. So every month I just get to make up something. And if I have extra time, I'll make an extra outfit. But generally, I'll do the one for the box.
So how much of your wardrobe is African textiles?
Oh gosh. Well, this is the issue. I used to work as a designer, so it should really be the question: how much of my wardrobe is from those companies I used to work for? So I was a designer for Puma for 7 years, and everything I had was Puma samples, my own designs, or the clothing. That's all I had. Every Christmas, my family would get Puma because they're like, "Oh, Puma again, great." Yes, and you will love it.
So I just have to ask you, what's blown my mind is stretch Ankara fabric. Like, when does that become a thing?
Okay. It's been out for a little while. I know what one of my clients actually is giving a little bit of a plug here. A company's called Stretch African Prints. She is an American girl who also, like me, did swimwear as well as a designer. And because she did swimwear design, she's African American. She wanted to kind of combine like an African heritage with her skill, which was swimwear, but she couldn't find the stretch fabric, so she started to print it and produce it, and it's just so popular. Like for our Wax and Wraps, we source, our fabric is sourced from Nigeria, so we've got a supplier in Nigeria who does those fabrics for us. And it's just because everybody loves it, because it's usually the Ankara or the wax print fabric is a cotton woven fabric.
Yeah.
And if you want to do that little black dress kind of number, the little fitted, sexy number, you can't with that type of fabric. But now that there is the stretch versions, I mean, they mostly are 2-way. There's some 4-ways. The ones we do are mostly 2-way stretch. And so there's so many options now, so many options.
Yeah. So you just made a really interesting point about your contact who is African-American and wanted to bring some of her African heritage into swimwear. In terms of heritage, so I'm aware that there are some white sewers that really love Ankara wax fabric designs, but they're maybe fearful of buying and sewing and wearing Ankara because they don't want to offend or disrespect people with African heritage. So they're often concerned that wearing those fabrics might inadvertently be appropriating African culture. So what are your thoughts on that?
It's a very interesting one. Firstly, I can say from my own company, majority of our subscribers are white Europeans,
Right.
which is very interesting. And females, majority of a particular age group.
Right.
I mean, like, I made it open for everybody. I didn't. It wasn't for me. It was more about the storytelling and the trade rather
Yeah.
than the person has to be of a particular heritage. But I know, and I've heard from some of them. Some people have reached out before purchasing, and saying, "I love your boxes. I traveled to Africa, or I used to work there, or I was a diplomat living in a particular country, or A, B, C, D, E, F, G reasons."
Yeah.
And they were concerned, being, back in Europe and being, a white European and actually wearing the fabric and what might be seen is a cultural appropriation. And I always said to them, if you love the fabrics, you want to wear it, then you wear it. And the interesting thing is with our fabrics is, yes, we do a lot of wax print. And again, as I mentioned to you, wax print is not originally African anyway.
Sure.
So nobody can really say they own that from Africa because it's not originally African. And then the fabrics that we do, which are African fabrics, handmade, hand woven, hand printed, you wouldn't necessarily think it's African when you see it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I felt when I saw that beautiful white and blue stripe.
Exactly. I just think that I mean, there is a point. I've had these. I organise conferences every year with my main company, and it was one of the panels that I chose to have was one about cultural appropriation.
Right.
And I had both white and black people on the panels who do things in Africa. Who, there was Black British, and there was Black African on the panel. There was the white European, and there was white Jewish heritage European lady on the panels as well, talking about their experiences. And it was interesting. I mean, it was a very interesting discussion that came forth. And what you might think might be said wasn't said from different parties.
Really?
So it's very interesting. I think that, there was from the lady who was Nigerian, her name's Enko. She was talking more about, her perspective of it, and, that it didn't concern her much at all, really. I think some people have a thing about the ownership of it and is seen as African and, it should be stayed with African. But again, as I mentioned, what is what is the African side of it? And I think when it comes to traditional wear, I think that's where it can be a little bit challenging. I mean, if you're going to a wedding or you're marrying an African person and you're wearing their traditional attire because that's what they wear at the weddings, and you're a white European or white American, whatever, you're wearing it because it's part of that event. It's part of your new culture marrying into an African culture.
Yeah.
So I think there's nothing wrong with it. But I think it's if you just wanted to wear a real traditional piece without the knowledge of it.
Yeah.
And then also trying to hide the knowledge, the history of it, or not sharing it, or adopting it as your own.
Yeah.
That's where the problems are. That's where the
Sure.
cultural appropriation issues are.
So what are your hopes for Wax and Wraps going forward?
Some of the things I'm trying to do is seeing a bit more corporate collaborations, trying to see if there's some fashion companies who would be interested in corporate gifting from us, because I think it'd be a great gift for fashion designers to have, at their corporate events or as Christmas gifts or something like that.
Yeah.
So looking at some corporate collaborations, and also looking at really the big drive, because we're going to be 1 year old in September, October time, end of September. So looking at really driving and pushing the business forward and getting this box in as many sewing room homes as possible. Like I say, give a box a home.
So can people buy boxes as gifts for people, or subscriptions as gifts for people?
Yeah, so we do the main box is the Afro Sewist box, and that one is available on a monthly subscription with no contract, or you can actually save up to 20% if you even commit to 6 to 12 months with the box. But you can also, if you just want to buy a gift for your family member or a Christmas present or a holiday present, then you can just do a gift box as well. So there's those options.
So can you tell me a little bit more about your masters? That sounds fascinating.
Yeah. So coming from the fashion bachelor's, and I was working for nearly 10 years with different brands and retailers in the fashion industry. And then I was just troubled by the industry, I guess. Sustainable fashion, ethical fashion was starting to become a thing. But then I just felt like I wanted to explore more. And I heard about this ethical fashion masters. It was the first of its kind at the Surrey Institute of Art and Design, which now is called the UCA, University College of Arts in Epsom. Then I think just after that, then the London College of Fashion did like a sustainability masters as well. And now it's all integrated into general fashion masters. So it's not a separate thing. But yeah, it was a great degree. Even my supervisor there has been amazing support to me. She spoke at my conferences, and I always remember her saying, you get out what you put in. You could be an A grade student, but if you present B grade, that's all I can give you. And that really stuck with me. Then, to put out my best and to really push with what I'm doing, the work that I'm doing.
So what did you research during that?
The African supply chain, I recognized that something was happening, but nobody was talking about it. So I started to research from the cotton industry, all the different players within that, and the umbrella companies which were in Europe, and how they connected to African cotton farmers. And then I explored the manufacturers as well, and what was existing. And then I started to blog about it. At the end of my degree, I said, okay, I'm going to do a conference and bring together the ethical fashion and the African fashion community. It was 300 people came to the conference. We was over the numbers that we were supposed to have there. And it was at the Africa Centre, the original Africa Centre in Covent Garden, which has now moved. But it was like this old building that was so cool. And it was just a packed out event. A really, really good event. But that was the end of my degree.
Wow.
And then from there, people wanted me to do it all the time, wanted me to speak about the topic. And I was like, oh, okay, I think I've kind of created a business. And I launched a book called Fashion Africa as part of it. And so everything I do now is under the trademark of Fashion Africa. So
can you tell us about the book?
So the book was a beautiful coffee table book. It's actually the 10-year anniversary of the book now, and my publisher is, we're working on a new version of it.
Fantastic.
Because it was also my publisher's first book that they put out. So they were a new publishing company for black and brown writers, I guess, would be the phrase they would use. And because, there's a big challenge in the publishing world where not enough highlight on writers who are Black, Asian, or of color of that kind of term. But the book it's a beautiful book. I recognized that there wasn't any books talking about contemporary African fashion. I used to work in the library as a Saturday job during my studies, and I know, right? If I'd get all the good books,
what haven't you done?
Harry Potter books if I wanted. I know. Well, after all these years, you do a lot after all my years. But I used to look at the books, anything to do with arts or culture or Black history. I'd go into those sections, and look at them. And I'd always found the books on Africa were always very typical, like the Maasais in Kenya or Tanzania. And it wasn't the Africa that I believed that there was and that I was starting to see. And so I decided, I'm going to create a book which changed people's perceptions about Africa through the vehicle of fashion. The book highlighted different designers, different companies, and looked at sustainability as well and how they all tapped into that. And I had beautiful illustrations. Nobody was really doing these books with all these illustrations. I hired illustrations as well. It was a beautiful book, and I put it together by myself in InDesign. And then the publisher found me, and then we got it published, and then it went into the V&A, to the Design Museum, Foils and
Is it
Amazon.
available now?
Yeah, it's still on Amazon there. Yeah, it's definitely still
I'll
on
put a link in
Amazon.
the show notes.
Yeah, definitely. So that's Fashion Africa by Jacqueline Shaw.
Good luck with the reboot with the second edition.
Yeah. So there'll be a few more others coming after that because it's well overdue.
Do you have any tips for people who are getting into sewing who want to take a sustainability-minded approach?
I would say one of the major issues right now is, there's so many major issues. One of the major issues is waste.
Yeah.
Waste. So when you're laying your patterns, there's something called the pattern lay that is done in the fashion industry. It's trying to lay your pattern pieces in a way that uses as most of the fabric as possible and has less waste. And even if you will always have waste unless you're doing a zero waste. So we did a zero waste jacket as one of our projects one month. And if you do have some waste pieces, look at ways that you can upcycle them into headbands or whatever it may be, or make, I don't know, jewelry or something from it, or patch it together and do quilt pieces or something. So that's one of the first things I'd be like, look at the waste issue and find out where your fabrics are coming from. So I know, like, especially I follow a lot of Americans, they all seem to go to this one major store. I don't know if I should name it, but they always seem to go there, and it's the cheapest of the cheapest fabrics. And they all seem to go there and they all talk about it, and especially they get a lot of their so-called African fabrics from there. And I know that these fabrics are very likely made in China and very likely polyester based. We focus on the fabrics that are 100% cotton, that it's African produced. And yes, it might cost a bit more, but it should not always be about the cheaper thing. Look for quality.
Yeah. And presumably if it's going to last for longer, it's more of an investment anyway.
Exactly. There you go. If you're going to sew with it, you're going to make with it, then get something that's really nice fabric. I love beautiful fabrics. I remember doing bridal dressmaking in hemp silks. And I know hemp people have maybe bad connotations around the hemp story, but with the silk mix, they were just beautiful fabrics.
I would love to see more hemp available for sewing.
Yeah, I mean there is quite a few online stores who are doing these mixes now, and these environmentally friendly fabrics. So there is things on the market, but the thing is, because for most people the cost of it, they'll be like, oh, that's £12 a meter, £15 a meter, or £20 a meter. They don't want to pay that. £2 a meter sounds like less of a barrier. But I would just say purchase for quality, don't purchase for the cheaper price, and respect the fact that you're making pieces that are going to be long lasting. And encourage more people around you to do that, to buy less and to choose wisely and to look after your products, your clothing. Sew for life, sew lifelong pieces.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. It's been so interesting talking to you, and I'm really grateful for your time. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!